Today I'm talking to Rebecca Page, who is an entrepreneurial businesswoman and a mum of three. I know Rebecca, but we're crossing paths for the first time in something like 15 years. I was trying to work it out. It's been a while. So it's really, really lovely to reconnect with you and have you here as my guest today. So thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
Good. And for the sake of our listeners and viewers, I wanted to ask you some short answer questions just so we can create some context and background to who you are for the conversation we're going to have today. Because we're going to talk about business, which I know you're passionate about, but I thought a little context is helpful. So you're a New Zealander and you moved to England a long time ago. But exactly how many years have you lived in England?
I was working this out. I think it's 22 years now. Yeah, it's definitely over 20 because we celebrated moving here 20 years ago, at least a couple of years ago.
Wow, that's fantastic. And you're married to a Brit. I know
am,
your husband,
yes.
yeah, and he's a Brit.
Yes, yep, we both know you, and he still drinks as much tea as he did then. And I still don't.
Right. Oh, fantastic. And you have three children, and they're very
Yep,
important, aren't they? They're a real, and they're relevant in numerous ways. They've even played roles in business ways, haven't they?
they have. Yeah, we've got three kids who are currently 7, 9, and 11, I
Very good.
think. I don't even when you call up the doctors or something and they say, "What's the child's birth date?" and you're like, I can't remember anything. I do know their birth dates. Yep, 7, 9, and 11.
I am one of three. Do you ever call your children by the wrong names? My mum
I
used to
do.
call me my brother's name.
Yeah, I run through all three of their names, and then sometimes I'll also run through my sisters, and every now and again I'll call them my husband's name as well. And once I called one of them the cat's name. It's just especially when I'm like cross and I'm like,
Oh, that's brilliant. My mum used to have nicknames for us for when we were naughty. So when we were naughty kids, she had separate names for each one of us. But
that's
there
when
you
they
go.
get their whole name. They get they
Yeah,
get they get their nicknames when it's like loving and cute and oh little so and so, and then yeah, when they're naughty, it's the whole name
right.
at a very
Well,
solemn tone,
mm. And
sometimes shouty.
oh, I bet the shout back. And where do you come from in New Zealand? I actually have no idea.
I come from Howick, which is a little suburb kind of on the in between Auckland and Manukau. So it's like kind of south-ish, yeah,
Mm.
North
And
Island.
mm, yeah, I've been to Auckland, which I love, but that's the only place in New Zealand I've been to. And when you moved, because if I understand correctly, a lot of your family has moved, but you were not the first to move. Is
No,
that right? You
so no,
followed someone else.
yeah, I've got three sisters, and the middle sister, she went to do what we call your big OE, your big overseas experience, and it's you usually do it either straight after school or straight after university, training college, apprentice, whatever you are choosing to do, or sometimes a couple of years into a job, but it's usually a straight after whatever training you do, schooling. And she came and did that, and she'd been living here for a few years, and I went off to university, and so my youngest sister. I don't even remember what she did. She did something. I know she did something. Gosh, she'll be embarrassed when I tell her I couldn't remember. So she went off and did something, and then we were all kind of off doing our things. And in the meantime, my parents had purchased a franchise for a business coaching business coaching system, which my dad had been a business coach for many years very successfully in New Zealand, and they purchased the master license with a group of other people in Scotland.
Mm.
And that had been running for a while, and then they decided, since we were all adults, they were going to come and move over and run it for a while, or help run it. I don't remember the specifics of it, but they were coming over here to do that. And meanwhile, I'd had a business in New Zealand, which I had just successfully sold, and I had money burning a hole in my pocket, and I was young, and I'd finished university, and I was like, I want to go have my big OE. And there was a conversation around the dinner table where my parents were sat there really uncomfortable because they'd decided to move to Scotland. I was sat there really uncomfortable because I'd decided I was moving to the UK, and my youngest sister was just totally oblivious to all of it. And we had to then it all came out at the dinner table. And my younger sister was just like, "You're leaving me, like you're all leaving." And she moved 6 months after we did. So
Mm.
my mum and dad and I, we had all booked flights within 2 days of each other. We'd already all booked our flights before we discussed it. Um, I think I think we were all a little bit like, if we don't just book it, we're going to back out and not do it. So we'd all put the stake in the ground and said we're moving. And then my younger sister ended up coming out 6 months after us.
Mm.
And then now both my sisters and I have all had children and married and all of that, people who live here. So yeah,
Wow.
we're all pretty permanent now, other than the accent and the longings for New Zealand food and
Mm.
missing the people.
Mm. And are your
And my
parents
cousin lives
still?
here as well.
Oh, wow. And are your
Yeah.
parents in Scotland, or are they in
No,
England now, where you are?
yeah, they moved about a wee bit, and then now they've settled in Milton Keynes, which is just under an hour from where I am. It's kind of just under an hour from all three of us girls in
Mm.
different directions. So I think as they get older, it would be nice for them to live closer to some of us so that we can
Mm.
kind of be there more. But I mean, it's an easy drive. It's not like, one end of New Zealand to the other, like some
Mm.
people, or one
Mm.
side of Europe to the other, like some people are dealing with.
Absolutely. And one of the things I've been thinking about because I have many friends who are in Australia and New Zealand, some of my closest friends are in Australia. And I often think that one of the hardest, they're British, and one of the hardest things to deal with as we get older and is if you're settled in an environment, you're married, you've got children, you've got your whole family there, and then one of your parents is ill or needs you, or you just miss them, it's a bit of a gulf of distance
Yeah.
and time. And so do you feel, now that you're settled with, your own nuclear family, do you feel grateful that everybody is in your vicinity like that? That because you sound like a close family.
Yeah.
So are you glad you're all in the same
Yeah, we
country?
really are.
Mm.
Yeah. We have all we've always been a really close family, and then we've done various personal development courses together, and we're like, let's sit down and discuss things. And we've always been like that. And I think I was very lucky, and it was weird, and I was very lucky to grow up with my parents talking about different personal development things. So um, I grew up with conversations around, but what's your thinking behind that decision versus just don't do that. And
Mm.
it was, I mean, a wonderful way to grow up, but also very different from how most of my friends were being brought up. And we've always had that, and it's, I think, really helped us communicate as a family and not have big periods where people don't talk to each other and stuff like that. But I certainly, when I first moved here, I maybe, I don't know how long it was, maybe first 5 or 10 years, it was a really good chunk of time. I worried about one of us moving back, like my
Mm.
parents choosing to move back, or my sisters, one of them choosing to move back. And I must say, that, well, obviously very pleased for them that they've had children, and their children are lovely, and it's, wonderful for
Mm.
our kids to have the cousins, and then the cousins on my husband's side and all of that. Like, that's, a wonderful experience, but it was also just this massive relief of, okay, good. So no one's married someone from the other side of the country.
Mm,
We've all like all of our partners, except mine, who's very local, we've all got family in other places, but kind of all of the nuclear families and the immediate families are all within a couple of hours of each other,
mm,
which I feel massively grateful for.
mm,
I Yeah, I think I don't really know how to finish that sentence.
mm,
I'm really grateful for it.
mm,
It's important to me as a
mm,
person.
mm,
I appreciate not everybody has that feeling, but that for me it is really important.
mm. Yeah, absolutely. So it's nice that that's been it's taken care of itself quite naturally. So that's
Yes.
really good.
Yeah.
And we first met cross paths through personal development, and we're now crossing
Yeah.
paths through business personal development.
Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting where we started and where we are now. And how, when you first came over to England, how easy was it to settle into the environment? And you mentioned you sold a business before you came. So
I
when you
did.
came to England, did you start with a business or did you become an employee? I'm really intrigued whether you've even ever been an employee.
I have been an employee a few times. I worked various jobs as a teenager. And then I worked my first post-university job. I worked a lot in um, nursing homes as a teenager. And then my first university job was post-university job was with Air New Zealand um, in the call center. And the first 6 weeks, wonderful. I really enjoyed the environment and I really enjoyed the company. But the first 6 weeks training was all disaster training. And I
Mm,
don't know if it was just because that was the time of the year I joined or whether that is the normal thing that they do for call center employees. But it was 6 weeks of this intensive. I don't know if it was the whole 6 weeks actually, now that I recall it. It just seemed like I was there for 6 or 7 weeks, and it seemed like a very large chunk of it was all about if a plane crashed
mm,
and how all of the systems, and obviously that size company, there's very evolved systems and very particular way things would need to be dealt with, and their disaster training is to my unexperienced eye seemed meticulous, and it just scared the living bejesus out of me. And I was just like, no, thank you. I just don't think this is for me. Um, and so I left. And then that was my last experience of being an employee for a little while. I think it just was like the universe saying to me, this employee thing is not for you. See you later. Go make another business. And I'd had businesses as a child, as a teenager, I put myself through university with businesses that I was running. And so I then went and did an entrepreneur's training from a guy called Brad Sugars, who at the time was a very well-known entrepreneur in New Zealand and Australia, and I believe he still is. And I went and did his billionaire in training, millionaire in training, something like that. It was an intensive 1 week like live-in thing with all of these people, and we went and lived in a resorty hotel type place and
mm,
had long, long, long days of like starting at 7 in the morning, 6:30 in the morning, you'd go do volleyball together so that you got your blood pumping, and then you'd go in and you'd learn all about turning around a business and about investing and this and that. And it was, I was at 18, 20. I can't even remember. I was young and everyone else was 30s, 40s, 50s. And I just soaked it all up. And I came back and I've forgotten the question, but I'll tell you anyway. I bought a gift and florist shop for next to nothing. It was um, tiny 12-foot by 12-foot space in the entranceway of National Women's Hospital, which at the time was the biggest maternity hospital in the area in New Zealand. And I bought that and I ran it and I turned it around and then I sold it. And then I did the same with a beauty salon, and I took the knowledge that I'd gained plus the bits of trying to start my own business that I'd done all the way through my kind of child and teen years. I've forgotten the question. Anyway, that's what I did.
Mm. And so it was the beauty salon, the business you sold before you came to England?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
So I sold the flower shop. I'm quite allergic to gift, well, not, it's a gift and flower shop, had a lot of flowers, and I realized, I had not realized I was quite allergic to flowers.
Mm,
And the pollen really bothered me, and I just had a blocked nose and runny eyes and all of that for however long I had that. And then I bought this little beauty salon, which had a lot of equipment, a big customer base, wonderful staff, and but their lease was expiring and they weren't renewing it. I think they were turning
mm,
it into apartments or something like that. And so I found uh, a new place across the road in an office block, and the agreed with the landlord for them to kit it out as a full day spa. And so they paid for the fit out, put the cost of that back on the lease so that I was then paying that over time. And I bought this little beauty salon for next to nothing. And then I ran it for 18 months, applied everything I'd learned in Brad Sugar's course. I was really at the time into Dan Kennedy's no BS books, all about no BS marketing, no BS this, and really like straight talking.
mm,
This is what works right now. It was like long form copy, this kind of copy, that kind of copy, and took all of this stuff and just applied it and applied it and applied it, built that database, built the customer base, and then sold that business. Um, and then moved to the UK.
mm,
And I worked in a what was the first job I had? Recruitment company, I think it was in Wimbledon. Um, Not really my cup of tea. Wasn't nice enough people, but just really hardcore sales environment. And I don't know. My belief is that when a customer wants something and you've got a solution, you can
mm,
pitch it so that they meet. But if you're doing this and you're trying to force your solution down someone else's throat who doesn't really want it. And it was all manipulative type sales
mm,
techniques. And I
mm,
appreciate that might not be how they would describe it, but I felt with my background it was not authentic
mm,
solution based selling. And
mm,
in my opinion, if you have a product that's going to make someone's life, whether it's a business or a customer or, B2C, B2B, whoever, if it's going to help that person and make their life better in some way or help them do their job better or whatever it is, you are providing a wonderful service and you should sell the heck out of that. Like you
mm,
really should. But where you're trying to fit your solution on top of a different person's problem that isn't quite this, I just, no, thank you.
mm,
And then I had another job for a while in a day spa. No, a gym, a very big gym. And then I started my own business. So it was a couple of years I'd been here before I then
mm.
started my own business. But like I was early 20s and clubbing, and
Having a good time. And
yeah,
and
I was having a great time.
and so were those two jobs the only two employee jobs you've had? And since then, you have run your own business?
I think so.
Because
I don't know. I don't know I've ever really counted that.
no,
My solution to everything is start a business.
yes,
I mean, unless it's health or mental health or, something where you need a specific person to help you with
expertise
a
or
particular
yeah,
problem. Yeah, particular expertise, that's a good word. If somebody has a particular expertise to fit that solution, that problem, definitely go get the help. Otherwise, start a business.
mm,
It's a solution to everything.
that's wonderful. So when I'm intrigued now. So when you came to England, you're in a different environment. You're young, you're having a good time,
Yep.
partying and all the rest of it. But was there something where you said your own advice to yourself? So to others, you say start a business. Was there something you were
Yeah.
going through in life where you went, the solution is, Rebecca,
Yes.
start a
Yeah.
business.
So I was working for a company called Cannons. I don't know if they've been bought out by someone actually, but they were
Mm,
a chain of health clubs, might still be, I don't know. And I worked in the bank branch, which is a massive 5,000 member health club. And I started off running the day spa, and for obvious reasons, because I just sold one in New Zealand. Um, and then I ended up running their sales department, I think, which was not such a good fit for me, actually, in retrospect. I
mm,
really enjoyed the running of the spa, but not so much of the sales team. I felt a little bit like I was floundering. That just
mm,
wasn't my skill base. But I think maybe halfway through, I had great friends at that job, and my work colleagues, like they came to my wedding years later, still in touch with many of them. They are just like wonderful, wonderful people. One of them's just had a baby, wonderful people. And I think that really kept me in that job. But I
mm,
was looking at the footfall coming in, and I would be sat in the sales office, and I knew what the revenue was because I was head of sales, but I can't help myself. I go into a restaurant and I'm in my mind, I count how many people are in the room, what the average cover would be, roughly how many of them are drinking alcohol, how much that would lift the average sale for each table. And then I'm working out how many staff there are, and I'm taking that cost away. And that stuff happens in my mind all the time, and I
mm,
can't turn it off. Like I cannot turn that off.
mm,
And so I would be in the spa and I'd be calculating where their costs were and where their profits were. And I had spreadsheets of this stuff, but I would still be like, I'd go work out in the gym and I remember being on a cross trainer and thinking, God, if they would just do that, this whole department would be so much more profitable. But then, I was operating in a large company that had particular ways of doing things, and my personal goals of my department being the most profitable weren't necessarily aligned with what this massive company was trying to achieve across
mm,
all of its health clubs, right?
mm,
And, when you've got a large company like that, there's going to be lots of factors at play. And I found it just so frustrating where I'm like, but you could make more money if we did that. But then that didn't necessarily align with where the whole company was going. So I I remember being on this cross trainer and having these calculations going around in my head and just being like, this is enough. I need to go and run my own business again. Like this is
mm,
not working for me.
mm,
I see why they're not implementing XYZ, and I appreciate that that is what is best for the company.
mm,
But it's drive like I feel itchy. Like this is
mm,
I need to go do this.
mm. And when you went to do your own business, would you say then it was to fulfill on your own personal goals, your own values, because they weren't going to
Yes.
get met in that environment? Mm,
No. As wonderful as the people were,
mm,
and I liked the company,
mm,
and it was a good work environment. And if you're going on the tick boxes of the kind of job you would stay at, it ticked all of the boxes. Like I really, looking back, I can't give you any reasons why I left other than I needed to go do what my soul was calling for me to do.
mm,
But it was a great job, great
mm,
people. Like
mm,
there's nothing wrong. Literally no problems
mm,
other than itchiness. Like
mm.
just just let me just do that.
And then when you
Yeah.
listened to your soul and went off to pursue what you wanted to do, how easy was that given you weren't in your country? You were in England, only a few years in. Did you meet
Yeah,
challenges in that way? Or
I did. In New Zealand, we have GST, which is VAT here. I believe it's the same thing. Goods, services tax, value added tax. I think
mm,
it's the same. I'm not an accountant.
mm,
I don't even try and pretend that I know what all of those things mean. I know what I have to do to adhere to them, but I don't know the ins and outs of all of them. But it was like I used to know, if I had staff, I needed to go onto this website and sign up for this, and then I needed to make sure we did XYZ each month. And I knew all of the structures of running the types of companies I was running and adhering to the laws and making sure I paid the right taxes and I, did everything appropriately. But it was just simple stuff like, how do you get a bank account? And in fact, actually, when I first moved to the country, getting a bank account was hard. And at the time, I had a little bit of money left in my bank from selling my business. I mean, it was in no way vast sums of money, but it was, for a 20-something-year-old, it was a decent chunk of money, and I couldn't get a bank account. And it was because I didn't have a utility bill with the address. And I'm like, but I can't get a utility bill until I've got a flat. And they won't give me a flat until I've got a bank account. I can't get a bank account. I was just like, oh my, like, how do I fix this? And the problem, the solution was money. You just pay to do XYZ and it's solved. But then, that was eating up some of the cash that I had. And then how do people do that when they move here and they don't have a little bit of money set aside, like, or a family here to support them? That's hard. And I still feel irritated by how difficult it is for new immigrants.
I think you make a very interesting point there that hasn't really changed with time, because I'm an immigrant into the US and it wasn't particularly easy to get a bank account, and I did have an address, and I've been told it's going to take something to set up my self-employed bank account, there are more hurdles to cross. So yes, I share your concern that life is not a straightforward path when you newly migrate to a country and you want to integrate accurately and legally into the system.
And I don't understand it. Like, I mean, intellectually, we could have a conversation. I mean, I am not educated in this, so we're not going to have this conversation.
No, I'm not educated in it either.
But if we were, we could have a conversation about how humans evolved from whatever, and then this happened to humanity, and then, I don't know, the Stone Age, the Ice Age, the whatever, right? Like, we could go through human history and we could explain how we've ended up with the systems and structures and countries and religions and governments and all of that we've got to. But then I'm like, you take off our skin, how are we not all the same underneath? Why is it so difficult for that person versus that person? Who says that anyone owns this particular country? Like, and I feel this massive affinity and belonging to New Zealand. And if you would ask me, what's my country? Well, I would say I'm a New Zealander. But then they would very quickly out of my mouth go, but the UK is now home. But I don't own either of those countries. Nobody owns the planet. Like, and I just, on an intellectual level, I comprehend it. And you can say, well, these people own this and this is how this happened. And you could explain it and I would intellectually understand it. But then on a base level, I'm like, but we're no different to like giraffes and lions. We're just animals on a planet. Like, that looks somewhat different on the surface. And then I'm like, why do we make it so difficult for other people? I don't get it. And we could talk about the same evolution of the banking system and how they've ended up with the structures they've had, and they're perfectly logical if you go through the evolution of it all. But geez, really, why?
Yeah, no, it is definitely a complex area, and one that I am beginning to, especially getting involved in the whole podcast of moving countries, I am dipping my toe in seeing how complex it is. And I have a background in working in immigration, so there are some overlaps where I understand, but like you say about the banking, there is some logic. but overall, it seems unnecessarily complex, you know,
Yeah.
especially when people want to just do it seamlessly, legally, and contribute to society.
Yeah.
And
And with technology nowadays, it should
mm,
be just like click done.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
you have all of my information. I
yeah.
don't doubt that you have my information. Facebook can tell you, like, probably what I ate for dinner 3 years ago. Like,
Mm,
you have everything. Why is this so hard?
yes, yes, exactly. So yeah, so it's frustrating to think that 20 years ago you went through all that and nothing much changes no matter what nationality you are, wherever you've moved to. Um, but you persevered through all of that at your
I did.
time,
I got a bank
and,
account.
and you got a bank account, and
I paid my bills.
and you paid your bills and you paid your tax and you did all the things by the book. So, but in establishing that very first business, what was it? What did sing have your soul sing?
What was my first business? Well-being Business Secrets, I think, was my first one, where I had made, when I had the beauty salon I turned into a day spa, I'd made various systems for marketing and structures. And when I then ran the day spa,
Mm,
I mean, I didn't have all of them because I sold the business, but I created new ones. And then I got frustrated because they weren't in alignment with the company's branding. And so we didn't use some of the stuff that I had wanted to create. And so in fact, some of them I hadn't even created. I just kind of mooted, shall we do this? And no. So I then created from scratch a whole lot of systems for day spas, beauty salons, hair salons. And then I taught that for a while. And while I had owned a number of different businesses, I didn't feel I had enough practical and real success trading history in a variety of different businesses to expand that out into all kinds of different marketing for different companies. So,
mm.
so I did it just within the well-being, hair, beauty um, kind of industry, and what did I do after that?
Can I digress a
I
moment before you go
Yeah,
to your next business? Because you're talking about well-being, and stepping aside from the business for a second, when one of the things I discovered and in moving was the whole how easy it is not to look after, all aspects of your life. And I am looking to talk to somebody on the podcast specifically about how you take care of all areas of your life, emotionally,
mm.
physically, spiritually, and so on. But when you moved, how did you feel? Did you feel that,
Terrified.
right?
Yeah, it was. Um, I mean, I came from an area of New Zealand. So New Zealand is physically not dissimilar in terms of land mass to, I think it's the UK. You put all of the UK land, and if you squashed it into a ball, it would be not dissimilar to the same of New Zealand if you squashed it into a ball. So in terms of land mass, areas like square footage of the country, it's not dissimilar. But when I moved here, there were approximately 50,000, no, 50 million people in the UK and about 5 million sheep. And you can guess what I'm about to say next. When I moved here in New Zealand, there are about 50 million sheep, 5 million people. Totally not accurate figures, right? Like approximate numbers, and makes for a good story. So let's just round it to those. Um, and I came from an area of New Zealand which is suburban. It is categorically a suburban area.
Mm,
And I mean, there's many more houses built there now, but at the time, right next to the countryside. So I lived next to a farm, and
mm,
there was like electric fence 10 meters from my front door with bulls and steers and, you know, like animals right there. And we used to have rabbits come into the house in the middle of the night and terrify the children. And you'd go down and say to Dad, like, Dad, there's an animal in there's a monster in my room. And Dad would be like, well, how big is it? And if you said it was like this big, he'd be like, I'll go back to bed. And if you go, it's that big, he'd be up like a rocket, because it was either a rabbit or a rat, and it was good. They were going to destroy the house while we were all asleep. So I mean, I came from a suburban but semi-rural area, and I thought it was a busy area because for New Zealand, it's suburban. But then I moved to Tooting Bec in London, and without just using a whole heap of swear words, holy smokes, like you just walk out and it's just walk out of the tube and it's a wall of people, and different languages. And like, I mean, I lived in an area which was we had quite a lot of Chinese immigrants, and so I was used to hearing Mandarin and Cantonese and all of the different Polynesian languages, like Samoan, Tongan, Fijian, Maori, and English. And so that's what I was used to. But the tonality and the noise of different European languages en masse is actually very different. And it was just like this wall of unfamiliar movement and noise. And yeah, and it was just like terrifying for the first couple of weeks. And then it was like, actually, this really isn't that different. This is just more people in a smaller space and different languages being spoken. But actually, it's pretty similar. But when my younger sister moved over 6 months after we did, we took her to Camden Market on her second day. It was hilarious. She was just like, what's going on? There's so many people, and they're like pushing and shoving, and you
And
only get that like in
did you do that
England.
deliberately to startle her?
Oh
Because
yeah,
that can startle Brits from up
totally.
north. So
Yeah. We'd been here
cool.
6 months, and we were both totally. I mean, my sister had been here. My middle sister had been here for years, but I was totally used to it at that point, and I loved Camden because it's just so the food and the smells and the shopping, and like it's just Camden is awesome. But yeah, Vanessa was terrified and she was jet lagged, and it was so funny.
That is very
And the
funny.
loud noises and we yeah, anyway.
I used to live in Camden, so I totally relate. Loved it very much.
Yeah.
Living right in the heartbeat of it all. When you started the second business, how different was that? Because by then you are feeling more grounded and settled into the UK. But I'm just curious how much of evolve, how what does it take to start? Because I do see moving countries as an opportunity, and I think it makes you think on your feet, and you get disappointments or you get challenges, but something pivots, and you often see an opportunity on the flip side of the disappointment. So how easy has it been, or did you see opportunities? I'm just curious on your experience of, being a young adult, moving into a new country, having a passion for business and a lot of experience. And you make business sound so easy. So on the one side, it sounds like it just comes to you, but I'm sure it wasn't that straightforward. So I'm just curious how England was for you. Was England a receptive environment for you starting your own business, and being independent like that?
Yeah, it's a good question. Part of me, I think that I had a lot of luck and a lot of privilege in that my family was here. I was not trying to move country on my own. I was moving to an English speaking country. New Zealand can be depends where you are, but school assemblies, for example, are held in two languages in the area that I was in. They would do Maori first and then English, and we learnt different languages in school, but it's predominantly an English speaking country, although you get a lot of Maori words just kind of, it's like in day-to-day use, and a lot of words that I didn't even realize weren't English. It's like it's just so ingrained in the culture. And I still say something every now and again, and my husband's like, what? well, I don't know what that means. I'm like, oh, maybe that's not an English word. I don't know. Maybe it's a colloquialism. I'm not sure. I'm going to have to Google it. Um, so I know I had a lot of privilege and a lot of luck with the people that I met and coming into an English speaking country and having my family here and all of that. So that's one side of it. On the other side of it, I also believe that your thoughts create your environment. And if you are expecting things to be difficult, they are more likely to be so. If things are difficult, is it because you expected them to be, or was there just not luck or privilege or whatever in that environment? And I don't know. I'm not a philosophy person. I can't give that answer. But I like to believe I have some level of not control over fate, but I like to believe that I can take actions and it propels me towards where I want to go. Is it
Mm,
influencing an outcome that was going to happen already? I don't, that's philosophy, and I
mm,
have no knowledge of that. But yeah, so what am I trying to say? So I think I made a lot of my own luck. I think I have a perspective where business is easy. I'm coming from it being easy, and
mm,
therefore it is. So I think there's that is a truth for me. Is that true for everybody? Categorically, no. It's going to depend on everybody's experience. But I also, when I look back at every business, because I've now sold 6 successfully, and I've had some which have been really big, like in the many multi-millions. And there is definitely a system that I have used in all of them. And it's a replicatable, is that a word? Replicatable?
it is now.
Replicable? Okay, great. Let's say it is. There is definitely a replicatable system which I use with funnels and autoresponders and lead magnets and an energy of the whole thing and a belief system in the whole thing and also tapping into some of the physics of what vibration and energy are you giving out, kind of law of attraction-y, kind of quantum mechanics. Like there is the actual like marketing mechanical systems and structures of a business, which I use every time. But there is also this mindset and energy and being that I'm applying every single time. Which has more impact? I don't know. I've never tried to do one without the other, and I don't think I would because it wouldn't align for me.
Mm,
And when I go into the science of it, they're so reliant on each other. Like you need to do both. So I don't know whether it's me coming from where I came from to where I went to, whether it's my mindset, whether it's the structures, which I've built those systems and funnels across many, many mentors and many, many different courses, and not just personal development ones like we've discussed, but also business courses and business personal development and actual like Google SEO, Facebook ads, like all of the technical stuff. So I've built those systems and processes across a lot of different places. But there's also an element of everybody has their level of genius and their place of what they're really good at. And I genuinely believe that, like every single person, and you might know where your zone of genius is, or you might not, but there is a zone and a place that you get to where when you're in that, life flows and everything just happens. Is this particular environment set up for me personally to have that? I don't know. Yeah, maybe. But also, I've created that for myself. I've on purpose gone out and met good-hearted people. And I don't, sometimes you meet someone and you're just like, ugh, ugh, just no, thank you. I don't go and have another conversation with that person. When I feel that ick vibe, I don't go there again. And
mm,
I meet people who are warm and nice, and who are, yes, they've got where they want to have their own success, but they're also lifting others around them in
Mm,
who they are as well as the stuff they do. And that's the person I then go seek out again. So was
mm,
the UK just a good place to do that? Maybe. Yeah. You could, there's a lot one could say about the entrepreneurial environment in the UK that's positive, and there's a lot that you could say is negative. And then you go into the tax stuff about it, and that's a whole other podcast. Like there's some major positives and some major negatives and some major loopholes and some major this and that. And the environment just is what it is my
mm,
personal opinion.
mm.
You
But
are who you are in any environment, is my
mm,
belief.
I love that. Mm,
Yeah.
wow. Yeah, that's really inspiring, actually. Yeah,
Oh,
it's
thank
like,
you.
and it's good as well because you take you everywhere. You can't escape you.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
so
And
actually,
you know, you hear about, you know, when we're growing up, we read stories and the teachers teach us about all of these different inspirational people. And what's interesting is you do learn about different inspirational people on that side of the planet as you do on this side. And like the people that my kids are learning about in school, I'm like then having to go research to help them with their homework. They're just as inspiring, but it is some of the same people, and then there's, you know, like we learned about some of the British royalty and leaders in Europe and all of that, but not nearly as much as we learnt about what was happening in Fiji and Samoa and Tonga and who the kings were and this and that, and because that's the environment of the
mm,
country, right? So you
mm,
learn all
mm,
about that history. And my kids have learned nothing about that at school.
mm.
And I feel a little bit like, but this is important.
Yes,
It's not so important in this environment, but I would still like them to learn it because I think it's,
absolutely. How do you feel moving from an island to an island?
well, the interesting thing is I mean, I don't want to sound really stupid. I do know the UK is an island. I appreciate on a map it is an island. And that, but I don't know that I really understood it on an emotional level until quite recently. And to me, it just seems like it's part of the rest of the world. Like the New Zealand, Australia, the Polynesian Islands, we have a very, it's a very different culture to here. It is, it's a, I don't know. It's, how do I describe it? It's warm, it's friendly, it's lovely, but it very much feels like you are an island and you are away from the rest of the world. And I
Mm,
remember we used to do things like um, uh, drills for if one of the volcanoes erupted. And we used to have homework where we'd have to go home and blindfold and crawl through the house to get to fire escapes, and not fire escapes, but you know, a fire exit. And my mum always had tins of food and water and bottles of water and all of that, just in case there was ever an earthquake or a this or a that. And in the front of the yellow pages, there was the emergency guide. And that was completely normal to me growing up. And I had not comprehended at all that that would not be the case in all parts of the world. I just assumed everybody would do those kinds of things. When I set up home with my husband, and I bought some tinned goods and stuff that I had no intention of using, and I just put them in the back of the cupboard. And he's a bit like, "But why have we got these?" I'm like, "Well, those are for the, if you know the power goes out and stuff, and those are the extras so that we'd have enough to get through the week." And he's like, "But the shop's just there. We could just walk." But I don't know. What if the staff can't get to the shop? Like, and then I got like torches and spare batteries and candles, and they're all in a little emergency kit. And my husband's just like, "What are you doing? Like, what?" And I'm like, "Is this just because you grew up in a suburb relatively close to London? Like, surely they do this in like, I don't know, rural areas of the UK. And he's like, how rural do you think it gets? Well, very rural, surely. But his idea of what very rural is wholly different to my experience of what very
Mm,
rural is.
mm,
And you can't say one is more rural than the other. Like you can't compare people's living environments like that.
mm,
Like they are just
mm,
different.
mm,
And there's so much culturally that is, I don't know, you just don't know that that's not how everybody lives.
mm,
And that's a really interesting thing. Like if we
mm,
all knew everyone else's experience of how they were living, wouldn't humans be nicer to each other?
mm, mm.
If you all had a if we all had a comprehension of why other people are the way they are. I don't
And,
know.
and on that, we could take an interest in other people's cultures, which is clearly what you've
Yeah.
done,
Or my
because
husband could just eat the tinned goods, which is what I think he did.
yeah, better that than waste it. Um, but it's interesting because I think one of the things I see about you, and I think that's very important to you, as a human and as business, is being interested and getting interested in, and it's probably why the sales piece way back when didn't work for you, because what works for you is when you do get interested in people, and you talk about solution and what is the solution for them, not is what is going to give more buck to you. It might give more
Yeah.
buck to you, but that wouldn't be where you started your thinking from. So so
Yeah.
ironically, that interest you have plays a huge role in your relationship with business, doesn't it?
It does. And I'm in the process right now of setting up, having sold my last business. I'm now in the process of setting up a new business where I've now got enough experience. I feel like I've applied it to enough different industries and I've helped enough different people kind of off on the side where I know that my structures and ways of doing things work across many different industries. And so I'm now trying to pull all of this out of my own head of what actually is this structure I keep setting up, because it keeps working and it
Mm,
keeps creating these multi-million dollar or pound, wherever I am, businesses, and with ease, which are not difficult for the owner to run. And I've done it for me and I've done it for other people, and I've done it enough. I mean, I've had many more than 6 businesses, so I've done it many times now. And so I'm trying to now pull all of this out of my head and create these structures so that I can teach it and so that I can actually help other people, because I think everybody has something that they can be contributing.
mm,
Is it right for everyone to own a business, and does it work for everybody's lives? No. Like it's not a lifestyle for everybody. And if we're all the same, the world would be pretty boring, right?
mm,
But for a lot of people, having a side hustle or a business or an income stream separate from their job that can support their family, support their parents as they get older, support a loved one, support whoever, or support their community or an industry. I don't know what it is. It's different for everybody. And some people's, the lives they want to touch are the ones immediately around them, and other people
mm,
want to change the world.
mm,
And I'm like, good, do it. For everyone who has some kind of vision,
mm,
touching the people's lives around you is just as important as change the world.
mm,
Because how does change the world happen? Well, it happens one person and one community at a time, doesn't it?
mm,
So
mm,
if I can take my knowledge and explain it in a way and set up the systems and the structures and the templates and all of that, that other people can use that to make some difference in the world, well, maybe that's why I've done all of the things I've done. Maybe that's what
mm,
led me here.
mm.
I'd
Uh,
hope so.
yeah, yeah, I think so. And do you think off the cuff that you can think of any, like, if someone's listening to you here and they're like, you've mentioned a few things, you've talked about, their, if they can relate to the genius that they are within them. You've talked about their vision, and we've talked about being interested, and like you just said now, serving people close to you or further. Um, what tips would you want to leave somebody with as a little takeaway here and now?
Yeah. So if someone is thinking of having a business, or is just like, well, I need to earn extra money for XYZ, what could I do? What is the thing that you could just talk about all day? If you are someone who likes a glass of wine, if you have 3 or 4 glasses of wine and somebody asks you a question, what's that one that you then go, oh no, I really talked for way too long about that. Oh no, I got on my high horse about that. How embarrassing. I hope I didn't say anything awful. Like that thing that you're so passionate about. Like when I get on my high horse about how is this human different from this human, like I know I can just talk and talk and talk. And then I'm like, everyone should have a business. Everyone should have money. Everyone should be able to make the difference they want to make. Why is the world like this? And I get really passionate about it. And I get the same way if we're talking about a Facebook ad lead magnet funnel. Like I could just go, but this and this and this, and then you need to connect it this way, because if you do that, it doesn't work. And like I can just bring me your Facebook ad problems and I can just talk about them for hours. And everybody has a couple of topics like that. And some of them might be topics that you feel angry about. Now, that's not necessarily the right topic. It might be, but what's the one where if you had a friend who had that problem, you would be like, well, let's rearrange the weekend and I'll come help you. Like, I know I can make this difference for you. Like you don't need to be living like that anymore. Let me help you. Is it tidying their spare room? Is it having a coffee with them because they're feeling lonely? Like, what is it? Because everybody has that something that they will drop everything they're doing to go fix something for someone who they really care about.
Mm.
And if you can work out what those things are and then just be open to what ways you could create a business around that, those are the businesses that change the world.
Wow, that is really amazing. I love that. In fact, I'm going to sit and listen to that and think about that myself. So thank you very much.
Yay, do it.
And no, that's really powerful. And it's funny because one of the things, if I did introduce you as an entrepreneurial businesswoman and as a mum of three. But one other thing I could have said about you is that you're a pioneer. I've always related to you that way. When I met you, that's how I saw you. It's just
Thank you.
and literally that is what you've done. It's an age-old thing. People have migrated forever, but that is what you did. You migrated and nothing, you acknowledge luck and privilege, but really you brought yourself and you brought um the visions you had, the experience you had, and you were a pioneer, you are a pioneer, and you're bringing that forward now. So yeah, I'm excited by your new business. So
Thank you.
yeah, I'm really pleased for you, and I'm really pleased that you would embark on such a thing, because we are in new times, and we've talked also about the challenges people meet when they move countries. The one thing, as far as I can tell, that no one would ever stop someone being is self-employed or running their own business, because you're not taking a job from anyone else. You're going to bring money into the system. So it really is something where people who are moving countries should watch your space. So
Yeah.
we can include information about you in the show notes, so that
Thank
people
you. I would
can,
love that.
yeah, so that people can follow you and see, you know, if that calls to them, that you're a relevant person for them to reach out to.
Thank you so much. I will make sure to give you a link.
Lovely, fabulous. Thank you. Well, it's been a real fun to reconnect with you after many years. I really enjoyed talking to you, and I really appreciate you being and sharing your stories today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I've really, really enjoyed this. This has just been like literally chatting with an old friend, but other people get to hear us chat too.
Yeah, exactly.
So thank you very much to you and to everyone who's listening.
Thank you.